everyone. We are starting with the second chapter of this unit, and that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. The basic things we have already studied in the first chapter, that is reproduction in organisms. We did talk about some basic terms, some basic things which are included in this chapter also, and that is why the first chapter is said to be the basic chapter. Now in this chapter, that is the second one, sexual reproduction in flowering plants, we will be talking about only sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So here the general things will not be discussed, only the reproduction in flowering plants. And because we are talking about sexual reproduction in flowering plants, we will be focusing on the structures which are responsible for sexual reproduction, that is flower. So in the flower, which parts are responsible, which are the sexual organs of the plant, which are the accessory structures of the plant. So all those things will be discussed. So here we will be talking about structure of flower first, to understand which part is helping in this sexual reproduction, because in the first chapter we talked about vegetative parts. Then we will also try to understand different types of flowers. This is again common with this chapter as well as morphology of flowering plants. Then we will take up some important terms related to the sexual reproduction or the plant which is showing sexual reproduction. And then we will take up the structure of anther, the external as well as the internal structure, so that we understand where exactly the male gamete will be formed. And before the male gamete formation, we will have to discuss the pollen grain formation, that we will take up in the next lecture. But here we have to understand the structure of anther. So this is what we will be talking about in today's class. This is the same slide which is showing my information, and this is about the Telegram channel. And now you know the importance of the app, because this is the place where we are discussing the doubts and we are doing the quizzes. So in case if you have not installed the Unacademy Learning app, do it as early as you can, and there are simple steps. Go to the app store, see this app, install, and if you want to take a subscription plan, then the further steps are there. And if you decide to take a subscription, then you can use this code, that is Neela. This is my name and my code. So this will help you get the discount. And after you put this code, you just apply and you will be getting it. Now there are 2-3 different programs which are already going on this Unacademy platform. One is this, which has already begun, started on December 28th. So if you want, you can see the details of this program. It's a crash course, and these are the faculty members who would be taking classes for you. This is another batch or another program which has begun again on December 28th, and here these are the faculty members who would be taking classes for you. The third is the one which is going to start from January the 3rd. This is called Umeed batch, and these are the faculty members who would be taking classes for you. So your choice, whichever batch you want to join. So that information is about the programs which are going on and which will start on Unacademy platform. And this is our timetable. We are following this timetable only. And this is where we are right now, starting the second chapter, that is reproduction in flowering plants. Alright, so let us understand the structure of the flower. I'm sure from the junior classes you have drawn flowers, But when we draw flowers, our idea is either to color it or just so that it looks beautiful. But here when we draw a flower, our idea is to understand various parts and to know where which part is attached and to which part. Flower is considered as modified stem. Now what exactly we mean by this? If there is this stem and we know the stem has nodes and internodes. Suppose from one node arises a structure. Normally what arises from a node is a leaf. Suppose this structure which arises from the node and let me pick the color, and it changes into a green structure. Then from the next node arises another structure which again becomes large and brightly colored. From the third node arises another structure which becomes the male reproductive part, and from the terminal bud arises one more structure which becomes the female reproductive part. And now because this is a long structure, it's a whole long thing, from one part some structure is arising, second part arising, third part. Now if you take this structure and press it, so what will happen? When we press it, so it is going to become a compact structure like this, and we start calling it thalamus or receptacle. And now where are these structures? The one which we made with green is here. Then the other one which is like a brightly colored structure, let us use another color for it so that we are able to see. Okay, so this is that structure, okay, and the third one, let us use this. So here is the third structure and here is the fourth structure. So now when we say the flower is a modified stem, makes sense, and all these four structures which we have drawn, they are modified leaves. So this green structure is the sepal. This large structure which is normally brightly colored is the petal. This structure is the stamen. And this structure is the pistil. We will talk about the detailed structure of stamen and pistil because we are going to discuss reproduction in flowering plants in this chapter. Now this stamen, which is a modified leaf, and it is going to produce microspore. See, the smaller gamete is male gamete, the larger gamete is female gamete. So this stamen is also known as microsporophyll. Microspore is the structure which is going to have the male gamete, and phyll word is used for the leaf. So why are we calling it microsporophyll? Because it is a modified leaf which is going to produce a microspore. And each microspore will change into a pollen grain, and inside the pollen grain there will be male gametes produced. So if we talk about the pistil, then that pistil should be called the megasporophyll, because this is also modified leaf and it will produce the megaspore, and the megaspore will ultimately give rise to the female gamete. So now when we talk about the various parts of a flower, now we know what is the structure. So sepals, petals, androecium and gynoecium, or if you're talking about the whorl, then the whorl is called calyx. Individual members are known as sepals. Okay, then corolla. Individual members are known as the petals. Male reproductive whorl is called, whorl is something which is arranged in a circular manner. It is androecium and individual members are called the stamen. The female reproductive whorl or structure is called gynoecium and the individual is known as the pistil. So out of these four, these two are accessory whorls and these two are essential. These are called essential whorl. Androecium is the male reproductive structure. This is the male reproductive part, and gynoecium is the female reproductive whorl or part of the flower. Now you have seen the structure of the flower. There was a question which was asked in NEET, if I'm not wrong, it was in the year I think 17 or maybe 18, I'm not very sure, but I think 17 or 18. And the question was that the proximal part of filament is attached to. Now suppose we draw a stamen. In the stamen, this is anther and this is the long thread-like structure. So this structure is anther and this thread-like structure is called the filament. And the question was that the proximal part of filament is attached to. And the options were given as thalamus, anther, and some other. So we have to pick from this, because if you draw thalamus here, this is the thalamus, right? To which all the parts are attached. So now this is the filament. This is one end where it is attached to anther and this is the other end where it is attached to thalamus. Now which one is called the proximal end and which one will be distal end? If you remember the structure of nephron, we have proximal convoluted tubule and distal convoluted tubule. Proximal is closer. So the convoluted part or the coiled part of the tubule which is closer to the Bowman's capsule is called PCT, and the coiled part which is away from Bowman's capsule is called DCT. So this part which is closer, or the end of filament which is closer to the thalamus, because from here the structure has developed. So this end is called the proximal end and this end of filament will be called the distal end. Very simple question, but those who understand what is meant by proximal and from where that anther has developed or the stamen has developed, only they will be able to answer this question. So such type of simple questions are also asked which are based on the structure part. So now we know the structure of flower, we know various parts, and we also know why the flower is considered as modified stem, right? Now let us talk about the types of flower on the basis of arrangement of various structures. Now if I take you back to the same slide, now this is the first structure, the second structure, the third structure and the gynoecium. So gynoecium is arising from the terminal bud and these structures are arising from the lateral buds. So lateral bud is lower, then the next, and terminal bud is always going to be at the tip. So now here the arrangement is of three different types. In first case, if this is the thalamus, I have shown you the diagrams here, but we will draw the diagrams also. Hypo is below and gynous is for gynoecium. So here all all the whorls are below gynoecium. That means the pistil is going to be at the top and all other whorls are going to be below it. So here is going to, okay, here is going to be the anther, then the petal and the sepal. Or in other words, can we say in hypogynous flowers, the ovary has the topmost position. So if ovary is the topmost position, we call the ovary to be superior. So in all these flowers which are hypogynous, all whorls are below gynoecium. And because all the whorls are below gynoecium, the ovary is superior. Now, when we study the chapter of morphology of flowering plants, we talk about families. Brassicaceae, Solanaceae, Fabaceae, Liliaceae. Now, in that, there are flowers because those are the families of the flowering plants. So, we are asked questions on, they give us like 4 or 5 different names and ask us how many of these plants or flowers are hypogynous or epigynous or perigynous. So when we study that a particular family, say for example Solanaceae is hypogynous flowers. So all the plants which are included in Solanaceae, they will have the same type. So then we don't have to remember or mug up all individual names. Alright. So when we study morphology, we will talk about this again. So this is hypogynous. This is the most common one. Now here, this is the example, hypogynous, most common as I said. Epigynous, epi is above and gynous is again gynoecium. So all the whorls are above gynoecium. Now how is that possible? So let us make the thalamus. This is the thalamus which has become like a cup shaped and at the top it has fused. This is the thalamus. In perigynous, the thalamus can be of 3 different types. So I'm going to show that also. The thalamus can become flat like this. The thalamus can become slightly bowl shaped, or the thalamus can also become like a cup, but the cup is open from the top. Here in case of epigynous, what has happened, the receptacle which was like this has closed at the top. Now where is the ovary? The ovary is here and the stigma style are like this. Where are the other whorls? The androecium arises from here, the petal is here and the sepal is here. So all the whorls are above gynoecium because the receptacle has completely covered it. So here all whorls are above gynoecium. So where is the ovary now? It can be considered as inferior. So here the ovary is inferior. Now you may take various examples and mug them up, but again you have to link chapters. This is the chapter from class 12th. In 11th class in morphology, when we talk about dispersal of seeds and fruits, we have studied a particular structure This hair-like structure is called pappus. And this is the seed or the fruit. We know the fruit develops from ovary, and if the ovary is on the lower side and this pappus, which is actually modified calyx, is above it, that means when it was actually a flower, the ovary must have been like this and the sepals must have been above it. So ovary was inferior, and this is seen in case of sunflower. So here we can take the example of, this is actually a characteristic feature of compositive family. So this is how we remember and connect morphology with the other chapter, that is this one. Also, let me give you one more example and let us see whether you are able to relate to this or not. A very common fruit which we eat. This is an apple. You eat this. This part which you eat is a thalamus. And this is the ovary. So here, this is a transverse section of apple. So in apple, the ovary, which is the real fruit, is in the middle. And all around it is that thalamus. That means thalamus covered the ovary completely, and all other structures must have grown above it. So here you can take the example of apple also. See here, epigynous. This example is given here. So you don't have to mug up the examples. If you see and understand these structures, those examples are very easy to recall. Now let us come to perigynous flower. And in perigynous, there are three different types of shapes of thalamus which we have drawn. It can be flat, it can be slightly bowl-like, or it can be cup-like. So these three possible shapes are there. Now, where is the terminal bud? The terminal bud is here, okay? And the terminal bud will always give rise to the pistil. Now, where are the other whorls? The other whorls, the stamen is here, the petal is here, and the sepal here. In this case, stamen, petal, and sepal. Here, the stamen, petal, and the sepal. Now, tell me which one is having the topmost position. Terminal bud is the topmost position, so this is top, the gynoecium. But what about the other three? Stamen, petal, and sepal. They are also on the same level. So one structure is position wise at the top and the other structure is origin wise at the top. Gynoecium is origin wise at the top because terminal bud, origin, that is the topmost. And these three are position wise at the top. Here, this is origin wise at the top, gynoecium, and these are position wise at the top. Here, this is origin wise top and these three are position wise top. So both the structures, gynoecium and other, they are at the top. One is origin wise, others are position wise. So which structure can be considered as above the other? So we consider all of them at the same level. So it is peri, that means at the same level of gynoecium. So everything is considered at the same level. Okay. Now here, what term should be given to the ovary? Here we said the ovary is inferior, here the ovary is superior. So in perigynous, we say all whorls are at the same level and the ovary is called half inferior or half superior. Okay, and here we have the examples. Disc-like perigynous in P. Alright, now in P, in NCERT they have given hypogynous. So here instead of P we will do, or maybe what we'll do is hypogynous example, we will write Papilionaceae family is hypogynous except for the P part. Alright, so cup shaped in prunus and flask shaped in rose. So these are three examples of perigynous. Three types of flowers on the basis of arrangement of floral whorls with respect to gynoecium. So this part is clear now. Now let us come to some important terms which we need to understand when we talk of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. These are the terms which we have written down here, and we will be using these terms when we study this chapter. What is meant by a complete flower? When all four whorls are present. We have studied four whorls: calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. When all four are there, then the flower is termed as complete. You remember when we write floral formula, that time we write the flower is complete, bisexual, hermaphrodite and all those things, right? Actinomorphic, zygomorphic. Incomplete when any one or more whorls are missing. Suppose a flower instead of four whorls has three: calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. Instead, the flower has perianth, androecium and gynoecium, which is seen in case of Liliaceae family. Bisexual when both male and female reproductive whorls are present. For when we use the same term for animals, normally we use the term hermaphrodite. But at some places, for flower also, you will see this term. So the flower can be termed as bisexual or even hermaphrodite. So there is no hard and fast rule that you cannot use hermaphrodite for plants or for flowers. What would be a unisexual flower? When only one reproductive whorl is present. Now when it is only one, it is either male reproductive whorl or only female reproductive whorl. So there is going to be a flower which has calyx, corolla and androecium, the other flower which has calyx, corolla and gynoecium. So these flowers are going to be incomplete flowers because see, out of four, one whorl is missing. Such flowers which have only male reproductive whorl, they are called staminate. And the flowers which have only female reproductive whorl, they are called pistillate. These two are important, very, very important. So bisexual, unisexual, staminate, pistillate, all these terms are used when we talk about a flower. So this term, even, complete, incomplete flower, all the four terms we have discussed so far, they are used for flower. Now let us come to monoecious. Monoecious and dioecious terms are used when you are talking about a plant, or when we talk of diversity in plant kingdom, the lower plants which have thallus-like body. So even this term is used for thallus also. But right now we will talk about the plant. So now what is a monoecious plant? Monoecious word is not used for flower. This we have to understand. These four are used for flowers. Now, what is meant by a monoecious plant or monoecious condition? When male flowers and female flowers are present on the same plant. One plant has male flowers as well as female flowers. How are the flowers? The flowers are unisexual. So the plant has unisexual flowers, but one plant has pistillate as well as staminate flowers. So now what will be the dioecious condition? When male flowers and female flowers are present on separate plants. That means there is going to be a male plant and a female plant. Male plant will have only male flowers and female plant will have only female flowers, right? So now let us take the examples. Are you able to recall any example of monoecious? Maize, castor, cucurbita or cucurbits, coconut, these are monoecious plants. And dioecious, one very common example is papaya. If you have seen papaya plant or papaya tree, you would find that there are two different types of papaya plant. In the male papaya plant, what happens is, if these are the structure, you would find the flowers growing like this. This is the male plant. And the female plant is the one where you see the actual fruits growing here, right? So there are separate male and female plants. Papaya, mulberry, and one more example, that is date palm. So these are some important examples of monoecious and dioecious, but you have to remember that these terms are used for plants. So if we are saying it is a monoecious condition, that means it is a plant which has staminate and pistillate flower. And when we say this particular plant shows dioecious condition, that means here the male flowers are born on the male plant and female flowers on the female plant. Alright, so these are very, very important, not only for this chapter, even for diversity part. Alright, so now let us come to the male reproductive structure, that is the stamen. And now we are talking about the anther, because inside the anther is the male gamete which is going to be produced. So if you talk about the stamen, so first say stamen. So a stamen has two parts. This bulb-like swollen structure is the anther, and this is the filament. Okay, now we can stop here, or we can also talk about the attachment of anther to the filament, which is a part of morphology. Basifixed, dorsifixed, adenate, versatile, that part goes into the morphology part. Now, if we are talking only about anther, the anthers can be dithecous or monothecous. Dithecous is the most common one, that is with 2 lobes, and this is with 1 lobe. And this monothecous is the characteristic feature of Malvaceae family. So dithecous anther we draw like this, we show 2 lobes, and monothecous we show like this. This is, we said, is the most common, right? So if you're talking about the dithecous one, the 2 lobes, they are connected by a tissue which is sterile. It does not participate in reproduction. So if this is 1 lobe and here is another lobe, between the 2 lobes, we don't see these lobes so separated from each other. Here is a tissue, right? And this tissue is called the connective. Connective is sterile. It does not participate in reproduction. So if we take a section of the anther, so we are talking about a transverse section of a young anther. Why are we talking about a young anther? So that we understand the structure, and then when we will come to the next part, that is how the microspores develop in that, then we will come to the mature anther, or when young anther matures, that is when microsporogenesis takes place. Microsporophyll is this structure. It is a modified leaf which is going to produce microspore. So formation of microspore, that process is known as microsporogenesis, and that will take place as the anther matures. So we are just talking about the young anther. So if these are the 2 lobes, we are going to cut it like this. So this is the diagram of a typical dithecous anther. And we have to make this diagram slightly bigger because we will be drawing various cells inside. And there are questions which are asked on the different layers which are present in this anther wall. Now this particular part is 1 lobe, and this is the 2nd lobe, or you can say the 1st and the 2nd lobe. So this is the dithecous anther, and here in between is this connective. Okay, each anther lobe has 2 sac-like structures. We are not going to call them pollen sac right now, okay? And this much part, suppose we are drawing these sac-like structures, then this part which is from the sac to the outer layer is the anther wall. Okay, now let us talk about this anther wall. Let us make the outermost layer of cells. This is the outermost layer, and it is normally made up of a single layer of flat cells. This outermost layer is known as the epidermis. You have to draw these layers with me and label them so that we understand the layers and their function. So the outermost layer is epidermis. It is normally made up of single layer of cells. All right, now let us come to the next layer. And as I always tell you, use a different color so that it is easier to recognize those layers. All right, so outermost is epidermis, single layered. Okay, now inner to it is another layer which is made up of 2-3 layers of cells, and these cells are like parenchymatous cells. 2 to 3 layers. At least some portion of it we have to fill, because we will be showing some changes which take place in this particular layer. This is the second most layer. This is called endothecium. Then there is one more layer which is also made up of few layers, 2-3 layers of parenchymatous cells. And this is called the middle layer. Endothecium, when the anther matures, will changes into fibrous layer. So it will turn fibrous. Where, how, that we will see later when we talk of the maturation part. Now, the innermost layer. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make the diagram here, and then maybe we will enlarge that diagram at the end. Here there are some pyramid-like cells. Okay, so if I enlarge only this much part, say I make only one part, only one part of the lobe. So this was, and here we made that sac-like structure. Right? And then we made one more layer. That was the fibrous one. Few layers, 2-3 layers of parenchymatous cells. And then the third layer, that is the middle one. And the middle layer was also parenchymatous, 2 to 3 layers of cells. And now we are coming to the innermost layer of the anther wall. And the cells of this layer, they are pyramid-like. This is the innermost layer of the anther wall. So anther wall basically has 4 layers. Okay, so which are those layers? Epidermis, endothecium, middle layer, and the innermost layer, which we have drawn here, which has pyramid shaped cells, and this layer is the nutritive layer, which is called the tepitum. Now here it was not very clear, and that is why we made the bigger diagram, but we will make the cells here, and this layer is called tepitum, right? In the next diagram, now we are able to see these cells clearly. So outermost is epidermis, then is endothecium, then is the middle layer, and the innermost is tepitum. Now tepitum is the nutritive layer. Why is it called nutritive layer? Because it provides nourishment to the developing microspore. Now where do you think the microspore is going to develop? If we are talking about the young anther, then in the center here there are cells which are compactly arranged. Compactly arranged without any intercellular space, and these cells are known as archisporial cells, and these are the cells which will change into microspore mother cells. The abbreviation is used as MMC, microspore mother cell. Mother cell is the one which is going to give rise to daughter cells, and those daughter cells will be the microspores. So these are the cells which will actually give rise to microspore, and they are diploid. So this is the anther wall. So anther wall is 4 layered, and we have seen the 4 layers. So tepitum is a nutritive layer. Tepitum also performs one more function. It secretes sporopollenin. This sporopollenin makes the exine of the pollen grain. One more function which is performed by tepitum, it secretes an enzyme called callase. You have to just remember these few things for maybe one more lecture. So when we come to the process of microsporogenesis, we will be talking about all these exine and callase and why this enzyme is required. Tepitum also secretes molecules which help in pollen, pistil identification. Now what exactly is this? Suppose there is a flower, its stigma is exposed, and there are various different types of pollen grains which are carried by the wind. The pollen grains can be of the similar type, that means same species of the plant, or it can be from other species. Suppose there is a flower of, say, China rose. So when the wind blows, it may bring the pollen grains of China rose or of mango or of guava. So for fertilization to take place, the pistil of one species should identify whether the pollen grain belongs to the same species or not. Then only it will be the reproduction, because the species, the members of the species, only they can interbreed or they can reproduce among themselves. So there has to be some mechanism by which the pistil is able to identify whether the pollen belongs to the same species or not. So there are some molecules, glycoprotein-like molecules, which are secreted by Tepitam, which would help in this pollen pistil reaction. So these molecules will be similar on the pollen grain and the stigma of the same species, so they are able to identify each other. All these functions are performed by Tepitam. So Tepitam based questions are very, very common questions. So if we go back to this diagram, here we will have to fill here are those compactly arranged archisporial cells. And these cells are diploid cells, right? So questions on anther wall, questions on Tepitam are the most common questions which are asked from this particular part. So now from the structure of anther, what have we understood? That most common anthers are diathecous. They have two lobes. Each lobe has two sac-like structures. These sac-like structures will be termed as pollen sac later on. Okay, so right now if we have to give it a name, we will call it a microsporangium. Later on this will become the pollen sac, because inside this pollen sac will be produced, because this archisporial cells which we have written here, the archisporial cells, they will change into microspore mother cell. So this microspore mother cell will give rise to microspore. The microspore will change into pollen, and inside the pollen will develop the male gamete. So if you are talking about this process, then this will be called microsporogenesis. This we will discuss in the next lecture, and this process will be termed as the male gamete formation. And if we are talking about this whole thing, then we are including both, that is the microspore formation. The pollen grain is termed as the male gametophyte. Phyte word is used for a plant part, and in this plant part male gamete will be formed. So pollen grain is the male gametophyte, and in that there would be the actual male gametes which will be formed. Alright, so this is the structure of anther, and what we planned for today, we have completed all those things. We have seen the structure of flower. We have also seen the types of flower on the basis of position of various floral whorls and gynoecium. We have also seen some important terms which are related with the sexual reproduction part, and we have also seen the structure of anthers. right? So this is the first part. Now once you understand this first part, you will be able to understand the second part also, because we will be talking about the process of microsporogenesis in the next lecture. To understand microsporogenesis, we need to understand the structure, where exactly it is going to take place, which cell is actually going to help in that. So now we know where inside the anther this microsporogenesis will take place. It is going to take place inside that microsporangium, that is the sac-like structure. In young anther, it is compactly filled with some cells. Those cells are diploid. Now when anther matures, the size becomes bigger, the cells will loosen up. They will now, same cells will now act as microspore mother cells. They will undergo meiotic division, reductional division, because microspore mother cell is diploid, and the microspore which will be produced is going to be haploid. So here the division which takes place is meiotic division, because in sexual reproduction we said that meiosis is a must, and that is why microspore mother cell is diploid and the microspores are haploid. And where is this going to take place? Inside the sac, that is the microsporangium. Then pollen grains will be formed. We'll start calling that sac as pollen sac, and inside the pollen sac there will be cells, and one cell will give rise to the male gametes. So that part we will take up in the next lecture. Alright, so go through this part, try to understand each and every layer, because we will be talking about these layers in the next lecture also. Alright, and as I told you, if you are planning to go for any subscription plan, don't forget to use the referral code Neela so that you are able to get 10% discount. And don't forget to read NCERT so that you are able to get your doubts clarified whenever we have the doubt solving session. Alright, so this is the part which we have to do as homework: reading NCERT, drawing the diagram, understanding it, and don't forget to write down your doubts in that separate copy which we have decided. So I'll see you in the next class. Till that time, keep revising and keep writing the doubts in the copy. Alright? Take care. Bye.